So what kinds of things can you put in between your glass to create a pendant or charm? There's all sorts of stuff. So we use papers is what we first talked about, scrapbooking papers. They can be pre-printed, like off of your printer if you want to. They can be collaged pieces. It can be scrapbook paper. It can be photographs, anything that is paper, book paper, literally anything. You can also use dried florals, different ephemera, like if you have a ticket from a concert or something and you want to put that between glass, that's certainly something you can do. Fabric, small charms and rhinestones. When we get to small charms and rhinestones, those are more advanced. And so that'll be in the, probably in the shadow box class, because there's some specific ways of dealing with that stuff. But I just want to get your brain going so that you can start thinking about the different options that you have. Okay, so what you see in front of you are some pieces that I have already made in advance so that you could see. Something I wanted to point out, if you didn't want to do clear glass with papers and stuff in them like you see here, one thing you could do is get your hands on some of these. These are mosaic tiles. They're about, I don't know, 3/4 square, so maybe a little bit bigger. And that's how I made this bracelet. And what I did was I just wrapped them with tape, soldered around them, and then added jump rings and then handmade links in between to make a bracelet. They're really nice. They're thicker, which is kind of a nice thing when you're first starting. And though you'll have to clean them just because of fingerprints or whatever, they're not greasy or anything like that. There's a hefty number of them. You can buy them at Hobby Lobby. You can also buy them on Amazon, same brand. And they have a whole bunch of different colors and patterns and everything else. So that's an option too, if you don't want to just work with plain glass. They also sell mosaic tiles that are circles and all different kinds of things that you would use in like a bathroom. All of that stuff works as long as it is tapeable. As long as it will stick to the tape, you'll be good to go. And you can play around quite a bit with different options. Let me show you a couple of things that I have here. So these three are all scrapbook paper. I'm sorry about the glare. I want you guys to be able to see stuff, so good light, but at the same time, it's glary. The background is just scrapbook paper. This little crown in here is a paper crown. It's a sticker that I bought. So if you're a former scrapbooker or card maker, or still are, a lot of the supplies that you already have are going to be great for what we're doing. And just to give you an idea, this is one side, and that's the other side. And on this one, this is one side, and this is the other side. So you have two sides of a pendant. So you can make them match, or you can, coordinate them, or you can make them completely different. So you have two different kinds of looks, whatever works for you. This one, you can see through it because that's vintage lace that I put inside. And I think that's really pretty. These rhinestones are just glued on. I thought that was really pretty. By the way, this darkness here compared to the silver, here we go. See how shiny this is? This is untouched solder. Like this is what it looks like when I finished and cleaned it. This is with the patina on, the Novacan black that you bought. So you can see, I know it's not going to get very clear for you because it's not going to zoom, but you can see the color difference. You just have to kind of figure out what works for you. This is a larger piece where I've attached another jump ring on the bottom so I can dangle something up here. This is a piece of brass filigree. Again, this is advanced stuff, but I wanted you to see it again to get an idea. And on the back is something else entirely. So that's nice. This is a shadow box. And the reason you can tell it's a shadow box is because you can see the black back tape in there. Now, this is what I was talking about before. See how you can see the black back tape? If that was copper, but I was wanting to keep my piece silver and I was using copper back tape, then what you would see in there would be copper instead of the black. And I don't really want that. I want those sides to disappear, not be highlighted. Then on the back, I just have a word, believe. So all sorts of options. I just found this and I wanted to share it with you. So this is my very first piece that I ever soldered successfully. Okay. So the first time I took a soldering class, I took it from someone online. It was a company, and they sold a kit with an iron and everything that you theoretically needed to make pendants. And when I got my iron, it wasn't hot enough. The flux was liquid flux and it evaporated. It was a hot mess, but I didn't know any of that. I just knew I couldn't successfully solder. And that was really frustrating because they were doing it on screen. And I thought, well, it's not hard. I don't know what my problem is. And I thought I was just really bad at it. Just turns out that they weren't giving me the correct information in terms of tools to use. And that's why it's really important to find a good teacher who knows what they're talking about when they are teaching you something, not just somebody who picked this up on the side, but somebody who's done a lot of research and has spent a lot of time doing the work themselves so they can give you tips and tricks. So yeah, this is the first piece I ever soldered. You probably think it looks decent. It's not great. The solder up here, there we go, on top isn't very smooth and it's not very thick. Like I could probably use another layer or two of solder on there, but it's fine. For a first piece, again, I'm real happy with that. And if you're wondering what this is, it's a wire paper clip that was from ages ago from scrapbooking. We will do some of that kind of wire working and design with wire in the advanced class. But for right now, we're only worried about this piece. And that's all scrapbook paper. So it's a piece of paper on top of a piece of paper on top of a piece of paper, and on the back, a whole nother piece of paper. So scrapbooking skills, that's really what I used to make this piece. So the reason I'm showing you this is not to go, look how good I am, but more to give you hope, because this isn't going to be super easy right away. This is something new, and your brain is going to have to get used to a whole new set of rules and things that you're not normally thinking about. And the good news is that you're still going to be able to create something that is usable and wearable, even if it's only your first piece. So, and patina, this darkening stuff, hides so very much. Every time you make a mistake and you patina it, it looks intentional, which is why it's a product that I really like to use. Okay, so I'm going to put these aside. And let me show you some of the things that I like to work with. So one of the things I really like are these smaller pads of paper. This is from the Paper Studio. There we go. I know it's backwards too, but at least it's right side up. This is a Hobby Lobby product, but it doesn't really matter. Again, scrapbook paper is all that this is. Now, the reason I like these smaller pads, and this is a 4.5 by 6.5 inch pad, is because the scale is much more suited to what I'm doing than something that is regular size. If this was a 12 by 12 sheet of paper, these pineapples would probably be twice this size. But because this is scaled down for a smaller page, the pieces are scaled appropriately to fit nicely in your pieces. And any of these are great. These are heavier paper. They're not just, they're almost cardstock thickness of paper. And that's the other thing I really like about them, because they're backed with white. So I could just put this in all by itself and the back would just be white. I'm not going to. I'm always going to back it with another piece. But once you put two of these pieces together, you have a nice weight of paper on the inside of your piece. And it's going to look nicer than some of those papers that are real thin and see-through. If you do want to use a thinner paper, do yourself a favor and take that paper and attach it to plain white cardstock first. Like cut out your pieces and then attach them to plain white cardstock and cut it out, because that'll give it some weight in between and you won't be able to see through. And that's really the biggest issue. I don't want to see through one side to the other. You know, I don't want to see this paper coming through this paper or vice versa. To make cutting super easy, oh, wait, hold on one second. I wanted to show you other stuff. So I went to a used bookstore ages ago and I got myself a couple books that I love to use. This is a foreign language book. It's a French book. There's some notations and stuff in it, but that's okay. I can work around them. This book is also French, but I liked the patina. I like the color. It's much more vintage, and vintage is very much my style. If that's not your style, that's okay. But you can still use book paper. In fact, you could do all sorts of really neat things with children's books, like the words and the images from children's books if you wanted to. So I use foreign language books. I also use sheet music. You can see I've already cut out pieces here on sheet music. The one thing I will tell you is to be careful when you're using anything with words on them. First of all, if it's English words, like a dictionary, for example, be real careful about what you're choosing, because one too many times what I've done is I've used inappropriate words accidentally, not knowing, because it's on the back of something. Once one of these French books had the French word for pornography, which is pornography, except spelled with an IE on the end instead of a Y. And it was something that someone was buying for their mom. And they looked at the back and they noticed it. Of course, I hadn't. And they didn't want to buy it because they didn't want to give their mom something that said pornography on the back, which I totally understand. These are some of my favorites. So this is just a piece of book paper. I use paper punches to punch out my book paper. It's just easier. I can, if I hold it upside down like this, I can get exactly the piece that I want. Like this one now is framed out and says Jesus is, and I can punch that and I have exactly what I want, as opposed to just willy-nilly cutting. And then I use, these are rub-ons. Again, from scrapbooking days. They just rub on and that's it. You can also stamp with a rubber stamp if you want to. There's all sorts of things. It's really only limited to what your own creativity limits you to, and your supplies limit you to. These guys are super easy to find. Almost any hobby store carries these punches, one or the other, in their scrapbooking section. Amazon has tons of them too, different sizes, different shapes, and they're a lifesaver in terms of making things quicker. But if you're feeling like you want to do harder work for some reason, I wanted to show you, this is what I'm doing with these. So I have a pair, and one pair is the book paper in black, and the other one is black on white. And so when they back, the two-sided pennant will still be a monogram, but it'll be a different monogram on each side, which is kind of cool. So if I'm going to use scrapbook paper, in fact, I'm going to use, because now, of course, all of you are watching this at different times of the year, because it depends on when you signed up, but it is Christmas time right now. In fact, it is just a few days before December 1st. And so I'm going to make some holiday ornamenty kind of pieces with some holiday papers. This is Tim Holtz paper. It comes in a packet like this. Again, size-wise, these are portions of a 12 by 12. So when you look at them, if I'm going to take, I want to get a nice chunk of plaid, you have to kind of think about with your glass how much you're going to see of it. So I'm not going to center it there. I would center it like that, so that you get more variety, unless I wanted it to be mostly red. That's the beauty of doing it this way, is that you can totally pick whatever you want. I didn't even really look at, I mean, I looked at this part, but I thought they were going to be scaled. So these aren't scaled very well for what I'm going to do, but that's okay, because like this piece has a big 25 on it. So that could be taken, or that, or whatever, or this right here. What I usually do is I have a piece of glass that is whatever size I'm working with. So this is a 1.5 by square. And I use this piece of glass to decide size-wise what's going to fit, and then cut them out. And then I'll have to go back and clean this piece of glass again, because my fingerprints will be all over it. But look at this. This is really cute. And I bet this fit perfectly. Look at that. This is one of your 1.5 by 1 inch pieces. So I'll have to use, I'm going to pull that aside, because I'm definitely going to use that piece. Let's see. Oh, and these are also double-sided. Tim Holtz papers are always double-sided. So that's also really nice. All right. So what I'm going to do is show you how I build a piece. And because I like this one so much, I'm going to start with that. And I think I'm going to put red on the back. I read aside for a second. Okay. So I'm going to be doing this upside down, so bear with me. I'm going to take one of these 1.5 by 1s that you guys have, and I'm going to put it, I'm going to pick out which one of these little stamp looking things I want to use. I'm just going to use this first one right here. And if I were using one of the squares, I'm gonna move these out of the way so you guys can see this. If I were using a square piece of glass, then I would just cut it out with my punch, but I'm not. So I can't punch this. I actually have to cut it out. And actually, that is a really, really close in size piece, but it's not perfect. So what I do is I find on the paper where I want something, where I want to grab the picture or the image, and I put my glass down. You want to hold it as firmly as possible and in place, because if you don't and it moves, your lines aren't going to be straight. And unfortunately, I have to have it facing me so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so get that where it is. Roughly, I want the top of the tree. I don't necessarily need the bottom because there's nothing there. Okay, and I'm just going to use my pencil. Oops, I moved it even. That's okay. I'm going to make some lines. And mostly my lines are right on the green, which is kind of cool. When it comes to this paper, however, that won't be true because there's no lines on this. So I'm just going to pick a corner and start from there. It doesn't really matter to me where on this because it's all a repetitive image. So I'm just going to take this part right here. I'm going to line my glass up into the corner. And draw my lines. Now I only have to draw 2 lines because the other 2 lines are the corner. And then I'm just going to take my scissors and cut them out. Now you see how working from a corner actually does you a favor because it gives you those 2 straight lines to start with, but it also preserves all the rest of that paper. So I'm going to put it aside because that's something I can use later. And then I'm going to come back to my little tree guy here and I'm going to cut him on the lines. You want to stay on the inside of your lines if you can, because you want your glass to be, or you want your paper to be the same size, if not smaller than your glass. Bigger is not okay because that will impact your taping. All right, so I'm going to come back here. I'm just getting it as close as I can. Okay. Now, those are my 2 pieces of paper. Throw my scraps to the side. And what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to come back to this little sticker book and I'm going to find something about a tree because that has a tree on it. Let's see. Some of them are really long, like the decorated Christmas trees were grand. I'm going to use that, but I can cut it because obviously that's way too big. So I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces just by snipping. So I'm going to hold the piece I'm not using and I'm going to put this. I put them on an angle because then they're intentionally crooked. And I'm going to put Christmas separately. Oops. And I'm going to put that one a little bit closer to center and straight. And then, oops. How's this one feeling? That one's a little too big. Now it would fit, but you have to remember that your tape is going to be covering up your edges there. So you don't want to get too close to the edges with words because they'll get cut off. So I'm going to put trees right under Christmas. Christmas trees. Grand. All right, so now you can choose to glue these together if you want to. I strongly suggest using a dry adhesive like a tape and not a glue because glue can, if it's not dried all the way, can actually steam on the inside of your glass once you heat it and you'll never get that condensation out and that would be bad. So I've got my 2 little pieces. Again, not a whole lot of work, you guys, just cutting up paper. And I'm going to take my glass. And because I've been touching this one, I'm going to grab my towel again. It doesn't need to be wet this time. I just want to get off like any fingerprints or whatever. Make sure that it's good and clean. Okay. And I'm going to put one side down and I'm going to, okay. So this is a good time to look at this. So first of all, using only one of my sheets, Can you see how much my paper is sticking out on the edge here? I don't know if you can see it. So I kind of tap it down with the paper on my surface, and it's significantly larger than the glass. So I'm just going to use my scissors along the side of my glass so that that paper is smaller and will fit better. And if it's not perfect, it's not a big deal, because again, the tape is going to cover up mistakes for me. It's coming out a little bit on top. There we go, that's better. Okay, now I'm going to take the second piece of glass going on the back. I'm going to do the same thing, just cleaning it real quick to make sure that it's not fingerprinty. I'm going to put one side down. Once the side is touching that paper, I'm not going to touch the other side anymore, because I'll have to clean it up otherwise. I'm having the same issue with this one. This one's a little too big, so I'm going to trim it like that. And then again, at the top. There we go. And now I can put my two pieces together. And they are ready to go. They're ready to be soldered. Well, they're not ready to be soldered. They're ready to be taped. So at this point, what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and make several pieces ready to the point of taping. What I'm going to suggest is doing like 6 or so, because you're going to want to get a good amount of practice taping before we get into the soldering portion of things. So go ahead and make a bunch of pieces, make 6 pieces or so with your papers, and then come back and we'll talk about taping.